My name is Lena Carter. I'm 34 years old, and this morning I stepped onto the gravel of Iron Ridge Training Camp for the first time in over a decade. While the wind whipped dust against my legs and the sun glared off rusted flagpoles, I stood alone, rankless, nameless, just another body in fatigues. But what they didn't see was what lay beneath the standard issue jacket stitched with the name C. Lena. They didn't know I had once been buried by this system, that I had been exiled in silence. But the sharpest cut didn't come from the enemy. It came from the man who should have protected me, Colonel James Carter, my father. The last time I wore a uniform under his command, I'd barely turned 26. I still remember the chill of that morning, the way my hands clutched the strap of my gear bag tighter with each step toward him. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd meet me halfway. Instead, he read my name off the transfer list, exhaled sharply, and muttered just loud enough for the other officers to hear, "You're unfit." Then he turned his back and walked away. He left me there, not as a soldier, not even as a daughter, just a failure on a roster. What they didn't know was that inside the folded copy of my transfer orders, tucked in the lining of that same gear bag, was the key to his unraveling. Because the only reason I came back was to expose what he spent years trying to erase. How did I go from being the girl deemed psychologically unfit for leadership to the one carrying the last piece of truth this camp swore didn't exist? It started with the sound of boots crunching gravel, and the way the air felt thicker the moment I crossed through the main gate, like even the wind had learned to hold its breath here. Gray barracks stretched in disciplined rows, their windows like narrow, watching eyes. Beyond them, the parade ground sat in grim silence, the flag limp on its pole, too heavy with memory to flutter. I adjusted the strap of my duffel, each step measured, deliberate. No one greeted me, no one saluted. Just background noise, metal clinks from a distant drill, the low bark of orders from across the field, and the smell of oil, sweat, and old stone baking under a cloudy sky. I liked it that way, the invisibility, for now. A clipboard-thin officer handed me a file. No eye contact, no welcome, just bureaucracy dressed in apathy. "Observation unit," he muttered. "Quarters 12B. The folder in my hand read Internal Assessment Liaison. A joke, really. To them I was paperwork, a floating rank, a policy ghost. But the real file, the one buried under 3 layers of classified access and a forged clearance, was locked behind a separate name, a name that used to mean something. Echo Unit. I passed a mirror in the hallway of the old barracks. The glass was warped, the reflection stretched. Still, I paused, looked at the woman who stared back. Tired eyes, tight jaw, hair pulled too tight, no insignia, no identity. But under the fabric, stretching across my shoulder blade, was the tattoo I wasn't supposed to have, and the silence I'd been living in for years, it was starting to crack. A low whistle pierced the air. Drills had begun on the parade ground. I stepped out, squinting against the sudden brightness. Rows of trainees moved in sync, bodies jerking into posture with each shouted cadence. I blended into the edge, clipboard in hand, like any other pencil pusher. Until I saw him. My father. Colonel James Carter stood near the central platform, his spine rigid, arms behind his back, jaw clenched in that familiar way that always made me think of glass about to shatter. He scanned the formation, then paused. Our eyes didn't meet, not directly, but something flickered in his face, a curl of the lips, not a smile, too cruel for that. Recognition, cold and surgical. He knew. His smirk was small, tight, a scalpel, not a blade, and it said everything. "You're back, and I will bury you again." My hand tightened around the edge of the file in my arm. I could feel the heat of my skin beneath the fabric. The ink on my back seemed to pulse, like it remembered this place, like it knew that just beneath the drills, the salutes, the shouting, something rotted. I didn't move, just stood still as the cadets passed me in synchronized steps. I wasn't afraid. I was waiting, watching. Every breath, every order barked across the gravel was a reminder of how much he still controlled here. But I wasn't here to be controlled, not this time, because he didn't know how much I'd uncovered. He didn't know what I'd seen in the years I spent off-grid, or what I carried in the corners of my mind, names, patterns, shadows he thought were buried too deep to resurface, and he certainly didn't know what I planned to do about it. My quarters were small, metal-framed bed, one lamp, thin curtains that didn't quite cover the window. I dropped my bag, didn't unpack, just sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence fill the room. Then I pulled out the only thing that mattered, a thin, hand-stitched notebook. Inside, a single page, a sketch of the tattoo, drawn by the one man who saw me before my father made me disappear. Rain, General Rain. He'd once said it would mark me as legacy, as truth. My father called it vanity, but I knew better. I ran my fingers over the ink, barely visible through my shirt, and wondered how long I could stay buried before someone here dug me up again. Outside, the sun dipped lower, turning the sky an ugly yellow-gray. Boots clanged against stairs. A distant voice shouted lights out, but I didn't lie down. Instead, I stood at the window watching the parade ground empty, watching him. He stood alone for a moment, shoulders still straight, like a man with no weight on his conscience. Then he turned toward the barracks, his stride steady, his back straight. He never looked up, never saw me watching from the shadows, but I saw enough. I saw the man who once called me unfit, now guarding secrets with silence, and I knew, just as surely as the ink still burned beneath my skin, he thinks I'm broken. He'll see soon enough. By the third night, I'd learned the rhythm of Iron Ridge. Drills started before the sun. Orders barked through thick morning fog. Metal trays clanged in the mess hall, and always, that subtle hum beneath it all, like the base itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to crack. I kept my head down, took notes no one would read, watched everything. My father didn't acknowledge me again, not with a glance, not with a nod, and that somehow was worse than open disdain. He was pretending I didn't exist, like he could erase me by omission. He'd done it before, but this time I was documenting every omission he made. The incident happened on a Tuesday, around 0200 hours, during a surprise terrain drill. The moon hung low and red over the tree line. Fog rolled in thick from the east, muffling boots, soaking sleeves. We were supposed to run a navigation course, nothing too complex, just mark checkpoints and return before time cut. I unzipped the rifle case issued earlier that day. Something felt off. The barrel was jammed with compacted dirt, packed deliberately. I froze. My breath clouded in the air as I pulled the rifle apart piece by piece. The mechanism had been oiled recently, wrongly. The bolt was sticky, the firing pin missing entirely, and my map? Sliced. Not ripped, not worn, sliced. Thin, neat lines right through grid 4B to 7C. The precise path I was supposed to follow. No stray accident could have done that. I stared at the paper, my fingers trembling in the cold. Or maybe it wasn't the cold at all. The realization hit hard. This wasn't sabotage by chance. Someone wanted me to fail. My mind snapped back to him. His words, that sharp, dismissive tone. "You're unfit." I didn't panic. Instead, I folded the ruined map into quarters, slid it into my pocket, and stood. The night pressed in close, my breath slowed, and I did what I'd been trained to do years ago, before the erasure, before the exile. I adapted. I rerouted by memory, moved fast, no lights, no compass. Just intuition and a mental map I'd rebuilt 100 times in the dark corners of my mind. By the time I reached the second checkpoint, frost clung to my sleeves. My thighs burned, my boots squelched with damp gravel, but I made it back, barely. A few of the trainees were still checking in, others hunched over benches, nursing bruises and complaints. That's when I saw her. Private Tara Evans. Small frame, hair tied too tight, eyes that darted a little too much for someone trying to blend in. She glanced up from her clipboard as I passed, paused, then leaned in and whispered, low enough that no one else could hear. "Your gear was tampered. You're not the only one." My heart kicked against my ribs, but I didn't look at her, not directly, just nodded slightly and kept walking. My hands itched to reach for the notebook tucked inside my jacket, but not yet, not out here. Inside the barracks, I finally collapsed onto the thin mattress. The room smelled like bleach and rust. Pipes ticked above the ceiling. Someone snored in the next room. I unzipped my jacket slowly, peeled it off like armor, then pulled out the notebook. I wrote down everything: the jammed rifle, the sliced map, Tara's whisper. Then I stopped, tapped the pen against the edge of the page. What she said? "You're not the only one." That part stuck. Either someone else here was a target, or I wasn't special. And if I wasn't special, that meant the sabotage wasn't about me. It was about something bigger. The next day, I requested a new rifle. The quartermaster barely looked at me. "Paperwork's late. Come back tomorrow." I didn't argue, didn't flinch, just smiled. They were watching. That much was clear. But they still thought I was just a liaison, an outsider, a pencil pusher in boots, too clean. Let them. That night, I stayed up later than I should have, scribbling down patterns, watching how the halls emptied. Who left last? Who double-checked locks? Around midnight, the hallway sensors flickered. Nothing major, just a glitch. Except Iron Ridge didn't have glitches. I turned off my lamp, slid to the window. Fog had rolled back in, pale and slow. Then I saw it. A figure, moving between the barracks. No flashlight, no gear, just silent steps across gravel. They moved like they knew every crack in the ground, like they belonged in the dark. I pressed my palm against the cold glass. The figure paused, turned toward my window. I didn't breathe. Then just as quickly, they vanished behind the mess hall. No trace, no sound, nothing. But something cold coiled around my gut. Someone was out there, and they weren't lost. The next morning, I found Tara in the field shed, sorting gear. She didn't look up when I stepped in. "They know you're watching," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she labeled a crate. "Happened to Simmons last month. Rifle misfires, broken radio. Then they pulled him, discharged, said he cracked." "Did he?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, he just asked too many questions." My pulse quickened. "Why tell me this?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Because I think you're already asking them." I wanted to trust her, but trust had gotten me burned before. Still, I filed it away. Everything she said, every tremor in her voice, every sideways glance. After lights out, I sat cross-legged on my bunk, flipping through the notebook again. And something hit me. The twist I hadn't seen coming. It wasn't just about sabotage. It was who could get away with it. You'd need access to storage, to schedules, to maps, to weapons. Someone inside, someone protected. I didn't have names yet, but I had patterns. And I had motive, because someone out there remembered what I used to be, and they were trying to erase me again. But I wasn't going quietly. Not this time. I heard the wind shift. A door creaked at the far end of the hall. Footsteps, slow, careful. I froze. One step, then another, then silence. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The door never opened, but when I checked the hallway a few minutes later, there was a slip of paper on the floor outside my door. No envelope, just a message, scratched in red ink. "Don't trust the roster. Not everyone here is new." I stared at it, read it again, then again. My fingers curled around the edge, crumpled it, then smoothed it back out. Because that note, it wasn't a warning, it was a challenge. The paper felt heavier than it should have, thinner than standard issue, curled at the edges like it had been handled too many times. But it was the ink that got me, not just the words. "Don't trust the roster. Not everyone here is new." It was how they were written, pressed deep into the paper, hard enough to dent it. Someone hadn't just written that message. They'd stabbed it into the page. I read it again, then once more, just to be sure. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I was finally certain. Someone else at Iron Ridge knew what I was really here for, and they wanted me to see it. By morning, the fog had lifted, but the air felt no lighter. Overcast sky, wind stiff with dust. I moved through chow like usual, tray in hand, eyes lowered, just another ghost in uniform. But inside, my mind was flipping through a memory I hadn't visited in years. General Rain's office. He always kept the blinds half drawn, light leaking in like secrets refusing to stay buried. The room smelled like leather and gun oil. I used to sit across from him, hands clasped tight in my lap, waiting for whatever impossible lesson he was about to drop. "Instinct, Carter," he once told me, tapping a thick folder. "Authority gets compromised. Protocol bends. But instinct, that's what keeps you alive. I didn't understand it back then. Now I was starting to. I kept my head on a swivel that morning. Not overt, just enough to track who was watching me, who was too careful not to. Colonel Carter was nowhere in sight. But I felt him, like an invisible sniper sighted in on my spine. He was the type to pull strings before pulling triggers. And this camp, this place, was his theater. After drills, we were told to report back to quarters. A policy audit was scheduled for noon. On paper, it was a routine check, a glorified file shuffle. But I knew the timing was too perfect. I'd received the note less than 10 hours ago. Someone wanted to flush me out. The barracks were empty when I returned. I double-checked the door, locked it, slid the note back out from my jacket and pressed it against the inside of my locker. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I whispered out loud, "Why now?" My voice sounded strange in the quiet, raw, almost afraid. I scanned the roster pinned to the inside of my locker door, just as I had every day since arriving. 32 names. Half of them I'd met, a third I'd trained beside. But one name caught me now, because it hadn't been there when I first arrived. Riley Finch. No rank listed, no unit assignment, just a blank beside the name. I'd eaten at that table every day and never once seen a Finch. I grabbed my notebook, scribbled the name down, circled it, and paused. Someone knocked. 2 short, 1 long. Not the standard cadence, not accidental. I opened the door halfway. No one was there, just the sound of boots in the distance and a folded page on the floor. This one wasn't typed. It was torn from a ledger, the ink barely legible. The truth burns those who hide it. I stood there holding it, heart thudding so loud I almost didn't hear the second set of boots coming down the hall. Then a voice, low, measured, all business. "Advisor Carter." My father. He didn't wait for me to invite him in, just stepped past me, closed the door, and stood in the middle of the room like he owned the oxygen. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His eyes scanned the room, not looking for danger, looking for defiance. "You've been here long enough," he said. "Time to remind yourself why." I didn't respond. He stepped closer. Not enough to intimidate, but enough to test my stillness. "I know what you're trying to do," he said. That stopped me. I tilted my head slightly, fingers brushing the edge of my bunk frame. "Do you?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You're not here to advise anything. You're here sniffing through shadows, playing detective." My throat dried. Not from fear, from fury, because part of me wanted to believe he'd been too arrogant to notice. But he hadn't. He'd been watching the whole time. His voice softened, just enough to feel rehearsed. "Keep your secrets close, Lena. This isn't a place for ghosts." Then he turned and left, leaving the door open behind him. I stood there, frozen. He knew. He'd always known. He just didn't think I'd get far enough to matter. That afternoon, the inspection came, not by brass, not even by a high-ranking officer, just a junior logistics clerk with eyes too wide for someone who'd seen real battle. He swept through the barracks, flipping mattresses, opening drawers, scanning files. When he reached my bunk, he lingered, glanced at the open locker, at the pinned page with Riley Finch's name circled. "Problem?" I asked, voice level. He didn't answer, just closed the locker and moved on. But the damage was done. I didn't believe in coincidences. That night, I moved the notes, every one of them, into my boot lining. No more lockers, no more trust, and I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat with the lamp low, pages spread across my blanket, connecting dots that didn't want to connect. Rain's lesson echoed back again. "Trust your gut. It's louder than silence." I stared at the words on that torn paper. "The truth burns those who hide it." And I realized something. This wasn't a warning. It was a memory. Someone else had been burned before, and they weren't just trying to help me. They were trying to make sure no one else ended up ash in this place. I closed my eyes, thought about the day they pulled my name from the command board, the way Rain fought for me, the way Carter refused to look me in the eye. Then the crack of a footstep outside my door snapped me back. Soft, too soft. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, under the door, another note. This time, no ink, just one thing. A photo, black and white, a barracks wall, and on it, scrawled in faint chalk, were 2 words, Echo Lives. My heart jolted, because Echo wasn't supposed to exist, and I was the last one who knew what it meant. I stared at the photo long after the footsteps faded. 2 words, chalked onto old concrete, Echo Lives. The words shouldn't exist. Echo Unit was erased, stripped from every record, buried under layers of classified silence. Only a handful of people ever knew what it really meant. Fewer survived. I was one of them. But I wasn't supposed to be. Wind hissed through the cracked window frame. I pressed the photo to my chest like it could stop the chill climbing my spine. Someone else knew, and they wanted me to know that they knew. By dawn, the fog had thinned but hadn't lifted. A cold film clung to everything, metal, skin, breath, the kind of morning that made silence feel sharp. Training protocol kicked in at 0600, surprise field drill, full gear, real-time simulation. I suited up in silence. The gear was old, webbing frayed, boots too loose, helmet strap crusted with dried sweat from someone else's last run. Standard issue for trainees, but this wasn't standard for me. I wasn't here to blend in anymore. The simulation started with 2 sharp whistles. We were dropped near the quarry, 5 clicks from main camp. Uneven terrain, visibility low. Captain Holt was waiting, clipboard under his arm, radio buzzing at his side. His eyes flicked to me briefly. A flash of interest, maybe skepticism. Then he barked the order. Unit Bravo, you're up. Navigate to checkpoint Charlie. Retrieve the marker. Defend it. Fail, and you start over. Simple enough, on paper. But nothing at Iron Ridge was just paper. Our radios were mismatched. 2 had cracked casings. 1 unit's map was smudged, illegible. Someone's rifle jammed on the first check. Mine wasn't much better. But I didn't hesitate. I took point without waiting for approval. No one stopped me. The ground was wet, rocks slick with dew. Every step needed calculation. Our boots slapped mud in uneven rhythms. Fisher, the loudest in our group, muttered under his breath, "Watch her fall!" I didn't react. Didn't have to. I reached the ridge first, scanned the field, marked every possible approach route. Memory guided me better than any gear. Checkpoint Charlie was at the crest, half covered by debris, but still there. The marker was a dull red flag, wedged between 2 crumbling stones. I grabbed it, secured it, turned, and heard the crack of simulated fire. We were under attack. Holt had triggered a secondary drill, live action response. Bravo was being tested. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I dropped low, issued commands fast and short. Fisher, left flank, secure perimeter. Grant, elevated cover, now. They moved. Not because they believed in me, but because instinct spoke louder than doubt. Shots echoed off the rocks. Dull, controlled, paint rounds, but they still stung like hell. Grant stumbled, took a hit to the shoulder. I crawled forward, yanked him behind cover, and fired 2 return rounds. Direct hits. Fisher cursed, but I saw the moment his expression changed, when he realized I wasn't bluffing. We held the position. 10 minutes, then 15. When the horn sounded to signal mission end, I was standing, mud slicked, sweat dripping, breath tight in my chest, but upright. Captain Holt walked toward us, his clipboard tapping rhythmically against his leg. His gaze swept the unit, then stopped on me. "Not bad, Carter," he muttered. "Not bad at all." I felt the corners of my mouth twitch, barely. Not a smile, just proof. Proof I wasn't the shadow my father had painted me to be. We returned to camp in silence, but something shifted that day. They didn't speak to me like an outsider, not all of them. Some just nodded once, quiet, a sign, recognition, not approval, but that came later. Back at the barracks, I peeled off the vest, chest heaving. My shirt clung to my back. I pulled it over my head. Then I saw it. A long scrape across my ribs, black and red paint from a near miss. I touched it lightly, wincing. It wasn't deep, but it reminded me how close everything still was to breaking. I sat down, boots still muddy, and opened my notebook, logged the positions, the error margins, the reaction time of each soldier, then underlined one name, Holt. He saw something today. I knew it, but I wasn't sure what he'd do with it yet. The next morning, orders arrived for a retest. Same terrain, new configuration, issued by Colonel Carter himself. No explanation, just a note tacked to the message board. All Bravo unit personnel will undergo evaluation at 1600. Carter L. will lead. I stood there reading it twice. Every letter of my name spelled out like a warning. He wanted me exhausted, exposed, broken. That was the point, not to assess my skill, to push me until I cracked publicly. I walked past the board without a word. Later that day, I sat alone in the mess hall. Trays clattered, laughter echoed, forks scraped against metal. But in the middle of it all, I stared at my reflection in a plastic spoon. I didn't see a soldier. I saw the ghost of Echo, the last one left, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being seen. Captain Holt entered halfway through the meal. He didn't sit, just walked past my table, paused, and said, "Command's watching you, carefully." Then he was gone. I stared at the space where he stood and wrote one sentence into my notebook. They're watching me, but not all of them are on the same side. That night I couldn't sleep. Again. The cot beneath me was stiff, the springs uneven. But it wasn't the discomfort that kept me awake. It was Holt's words. "Command's watching you, carefully." He hadn't said it as a warning. It wasn't concern. It was a signal. I lay still, one arm behind my head, eyes fixed on the ceiling, paint peeling, a water stain creeping like rot across the plaster. I counted the breaths between hallway patrols. 4 minutes, 32 seconds. Then the memory slipped in. Rain's cabin. Winter. The last time I saw him alive. The wind had howled through the pines that morning. The heater rattled, barely warming the air. He sat by the window, boots off, cradling a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. His eyes were tired but sharp. "I ever show you this?" he asked. He rolled up his sleeve and turned, revealing a design inked high on his shoulder, an angular crest, the base of a hawk wrapped around a single inverted star. It wasn't in any manual, but I knew it the second I saw it. Echo Unit. He nodded once at my recognition. "One day," he said, "if you're chosen, this'll be yours. You don't wear it for the world to see. You wear it so you never forget who you are." I wanted to ask why me? Why not my father? But I already knew. Rain didn't need to explain. He saw something in me back then, something my father never did. And maybe that was why Carter hated him so much. The next morning, frost clung to the metal railings outside the barracks. The air bit through my sleeves as I pulled on my jacket. I kept my movements tight, steady, no rush, no fear. But inside, something smoldered. Because for the first time since coming back here, I didn't just feel defiant. I felt chosen. The orders came down at 0700, admin shift change, reassigned inventory logs, 2 drills canceled, which meant one thing. Someone was covering something. I walked toward the records office, slowly, like I had nowhere to be. Just another paper chaser on a dull assignment. Inside, the lights buzzed overhead, flickering, the smell of toner and old files thick in the air. I scanned the ledger wall and found it immediately. Rain's name, scratched through. But someone had left a note beside it, something that shouldn't have been there. A transfer request, from him, dated 2 weeks before his death. The recipient? Me. The form wasn't processed, just filed, forgotten. Except it hadn't been forgotten. It had been hidden. My stomach clenched. Rain had tried to bring me in, officially, and someone blocked it. I felt my breath catch. For a moment I thought it might choke me, because there was only one man with the rank, the motive, and the ego to override a transfer from Rain himself. My father. I left the office quickly. The cold outside barely registered anymore. I kept seeing that form in my mind. Rain's signature faded but clear, my name scrawled in his tight, rushed handwriting. I wasn't paranoid, I hadn't imagined it. He had chosen me. And Carter erased me. Again. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, that truth boiling in my chest. He didn't reject me to protect me. He didn't think I was weak. He knew exactly how strong I was, and that was the problem. Because if I rose through the ranks with Rain's backing, if I earned the Echo tattoo and everything that came with it, I'd become everything he failed to be. Legacy. But not his. Later that day, I saw him. Outside the drill sheds. He stood with his arms crossed, barking orders at a fresh batch of recruits, his voice sharp and distant. I approached slowly. He didn't look at me, just muttered, "Paper pushers don't last long out here. Don't slow us down." Then he turned away, dismissed. No acknowledgement, no confrontation. But that was his tell. He only turned his back on threats he couldn't fully control. Back in my quarters, I dug out my notebook. Every entry I'd logged. Every discrepancy. Every shadow. Every page mattered now. And I wrote one more line. He didn't erase me because I failed. He erased me because I passed. At lights out, I stayed awake, eyes open, waiting. And just before midnight, a sound. Metal on tile. A faint creak. I rose slowly, crossed to the door. A letter had been slid underneath. No envelope. Just one page. It was from Rain's estate, stamped 6 years ago, postmarked, unopened. Inside, a personal message, handwritten, short, scratched in haste. "Lena, if anything happens, you know what to do. The mark is yours. You were always the one." R. I dropped to the floor. The note trembled in my hands. He knew. He knew he wouldn't survive, and he trusted me anyway. I closed my eyes and breathed in the silence, but it wasn't peace, it was purpose. The letter from Rain stayed tucked in my boot all day. I didn't fold it, didn't risk tearing it, just pressed it flat against my ankle, letting the inked truth burn into me with every step. By the time the sun dipped low behind the barracks roof, I'd made my decision. If Rain had left something behind, proof, files, anything, I'd find it. And I knew exactly where to look. Iron Ridge had a restricted archive tucked beneath the West Armory. Most called it the Vault. It wasn't a secret, not exactly, but it might as well have been because access required clearance 3 levels higher than what I officially had, which meant I had to do it the same way I survived Echo, silent, fast, and alone. I waited until 22:30. That was when patrols looped back to the comm tower, a 4-minute blind spot. Not long, but enough. The wind had picked up again, dry, bitter, whispering through the trees like it knew something was about to break. I moved in shadows, hugging walls, ducking past floodlights. Gravel shifted beneath my boots, but I kept my steps slow, controlled. I'd walked like this before, in cities that didn't exist on maps, through corridors no one ever claimed. But this place was personal. The outer security panel glowed soft red. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the swipe key I'd lifted 3 days ago from a careless logistics officer. It buzzed. The light blinked green. The door slid open with a sigh. Inside, the air changed, colder, more sterile, the kind of cold that clung to metal and data and buried things. Rows of locked cabinets lined the walls, filing cases, digital backups, shelf after shelf of the kind of knowledge people didn't talk about. I moved fast, started scanning labels, unit numbers, operation tags. Most were familiar, standard briefings, supply manifests, debrief reports. But then I saw it. Top shelf, center rack, a faded folder, marked only with 2 words, Echo Unit. My hand froze inches from it. Even the paper looked older, duller, as if the truth inside had aged faster than it should have. I pulled it down slowly, opened it. And there it was. My tattoo, hand-sketched, inked in black graphite across a diagram of an operator's back, notes scribbled in the margins, partial rosters, training logs, redacted names, a list of operatives marked as inactive or presumed KIA. My name wasn't on the list, because I was never supposed to exist. I flipped through the pages. Each one felt heavier than the last. A grainy photo fell out. I picked it up carefully. It was from the old compound, where we trained in silence, where names didn't matter. There were 6 of us, faces blurred, either by time or on purpose, but I could still feel them. The way we moved as one, the way we didn't need words. And then a name scribbled in the bottom corner, Falco, the one who trained both me and my father, the one who died on our final mission, except that wasn't possible, because Falco wasn't on that mission, at least not according to the report I'd read after they told me Rain died. My blood ran cold. I scanned the file again, this time slower. A secondary page, barely legible, mentioned a secondary insertion team. Date, same as the last Echo op. Location, same zone. It wasn't just Rain. Falco had been there too, and no one ever said a word. I didn't hear the footsteps until the lights above me flickered once, then dimmed. Too late. A door slammed somewhere behind me. Adrenaline hit hard. I dropped the photo back into the file, shoved it under my arm, and backed toward the far exit. My boots echoed across the tile now. Too loud, too slow. The vault had gone from archive to trap. A red light blinked on the far console. Security override engaged. Shit. They knew. I bolted. Back through the rows. Vault doors weren't designed to slam shut, but when they did, they locked for hours. I dove through the last gap just as the panel hissed and sealed behind me. Made it out, barely. Back outside, my lungs burned. I ducked behind a maintenance truck, heart pounding in my ears, the file crushed against my chest. A voice whispered through the dark. "You're in deep now." I spun. Tara. Her face was pale in the moonlight. No expression, just those watchful eyes. "You followed me?" I hissed. She shook her head. "I heard the alarm. Saw you weren't at roll call. I figured—" I held up the folder. "I found it." She stepped closer, looked at the cover. Then she whispered something that chilled me more than the vault ever could. "I saw that sketch once, on a screen, a week ago." I blinked. "Where?" She hesitated. "In the comms center. I was running diagnostics. Someone tried to wipe a training file. I saw it flash before deletion." "You're sure it was this?" She nodded. That changed everything. Because this wasn't just about what Echo did. Someone was trying to rewrite it again. "Who has access to that system?" I asked. She swallowed. "Only command, or someone with forged clearance." I looked down at the folder in my hands, the weight of everything inside it pressing against my ribs, the fire from the letter, the silence from my father, the erased names, the lies, and one name at the center of it all. Falco. Someone buried him deeper than anyone else. But I was going to dig him up. I slid the file into my jacket and whispered to myself, "Next time, I don't run." The file stayed with me, not hidden in the wall, not buried under my bunk. On me, every step, every drill, every silent march across Iron Ridge's cracked gravel paths. I wasn't going to let it disappear. Not again. By the third day, I stopped pretending I could focus on anything else. I ran through formations, answered inspection questions, ate my rations, but my mind was buried beneath redacted lines and faded ink. Falco's name, the altered logs, and the photo that never should have existed. Every hour I waited made my chest feel tighter, like the air itself was growing thinner. I knew it was coming, I just didn't know when. Turns out I didn't have to wait long. I was called to the command building late in the afternoon. No explanation. Just a folded slip left under my tray in the mess hall. 2 words, scrawled in block letters. His office. The air felt heavier as I walked the corridor. Lights buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows across the tiled floor. My boots echoed slightly, no matter how quietly I stepped. The door was open. He sat behind the desk, reading something he didn't want me to see. Not until he knew I'd already seen worse. He didn't look up when I stepped inside. "Close the door." I did, then waited. He finally raised his eyes, cold, measured, like we were back in a war room, not sharing the same blood. "You're making enemies," he said. I didn't answer. He tapped a folder, different from the one I carried, smaller, older. "I've had to field 3 separate inquiries about unauthorized data access this week, all traced back to one sector." He waited, but I wasn't going to hand him a confession. So he continued. "You're not here to observe, Lena. You never were." His voice was flat, but I caught it, that strain beneath the syllables, the old fracture lines he still tried to hide. I stepped forward slowly, dropping my file on his desk. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. "You knew Rain tried to transfer me," I said. "You stopped it." A flicker. So small I would have missed it if I didn't already know him. He leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "He thought you were ready. He always did." The silence that followed was thick, coiled. "But you didn't," I said. "I knew what would happen," he replied. "If he brought you into Echo, if he made you a lead—" He didn't finish. I filled in the rest. "You'd be forgotten. You'd be outranked. You'd be replaced. You sabotaged my record." He didn't deny it. "Because I had to protect you." I let the words hang there, bitter and stupid. "You didn't protect me," I said, voice low. "You erased me." He finally leaned forward, elbows on the desk, face tightening. "You don't understand what Rain was asking of you. You don't know what he became. Don't twist this," I snapped. "He chose me." He flinched. Actually flinched. "That's what this is about, isn't it?" I said, stepping closer. "He chose me and not you." He looked up then, and for a second, just a second, I saw the man I used to salute, the one I tried so hard to please, the one who never looked proud no matter how hard I fought. "I didn't want this for you," he said quietly, "but you wouldn't let it go." I took a slow breath, then asked the question I'd never dared ask before. "Did you hate him, or just hate that he saw me better than you did?" The pause between us was thunderous. His jaw tightened, and then finally he gave me the only truth I knew I'd get. I envied him. I didn't know what hurt more, hearing it or realizing how long I'd waited to. Then his tone shifted. "You want to tear this place down? Go ahead. But you won't find justice here, just ghosts." He stood slowly, walked around the desk, stopped inches from me. "I won't let you destroy what's left of this program, even if I have to remove you myself." He said it like an order, but it landed like a threat. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. I just stared into the eyes of the man who taught me how to read silence, and saw fear. Not rage, not power, fear, because he knew I wasn't backing down. I turned and walked out without another word. Back in my quarters, I collapsed onto the cot. My pulse still thudded in my ears. My fists ached from how hard I'd clenched them. I unzipped the side pouch of my duffel and retrieved the photo again. Falco, Echo. And now, the new truth. My father had been lying long before I arrived. Not just to the camp, to himself. And that made him dangerous, not just bitter, corrupt. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the hallway walls. A quiet knock. Tara's voice soft. "You okay?" I opened the door, the photo still in my hand. She saw my face and didn't ask again. Instead, she pulled a small packet from her coat and handed it to me. "What's this?" "Decrypted log file," she said. "Pulled it from the vault relay you tripped. Took some work." I unfolded it. Lines of code, scrambled data. Then one phrase, plain as daylight. Project Echo Reformation. Operator designate. Carter, L. My heart stalled. It wasn't just about covering up the past. They were building it again, and I was their blueprint. The log file Tara handed me burned through my hands like a brand. Project Echo Reformation. Operator designate. Carter, L. The name wasn't what froze me. It was the date. 6 months ago, before my return. Before my father's cold stare across the parade ground. Before I walked into this camp with a fake rank and a buried past. Someone had already written me back in. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. And that meant only one thing. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. I stayed quiet for a long time. Just let the weight of it press down on my chest like a slow collapse. Tara sat across from me, elbows on her knees, watching my face. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just waited like someone who knew the storm had already hit. "What else is in it?" I asked. She pulled out a second sheet. Decrypted logs, partial phrases, most of them corrupted, but one line stood clear. Transfer of blackline failure pinned to Rain death order. Source C. Carter. I couldn't breathe. Rain's death. It was never random. Never a failed exfil. It was a pin, a scapegoat, a deliberate erasure. My father didn't just protect his career. He framed my mentor to do it. I didn't realize my hands had curled into fists until my nails dug into my palms. I stood up slowly, walked to the window. The air outside was cold, but the glass felt warm against my skin. Rage burns hotter than grief, and I'd been grieving for too damn long. Behind me, Tara whispered, "Lena, there's more." I turned. She hesitated. I didn't want to believe it, but someone inside the Watcher relay helped alter the comm logs. My voice came out low. "Who?" "I don't know, but they had access, Tier 3 or higher." Only 5 people held that level. 2 were generals stationed off-site. 1 was logistics lead, and the last 2? My father. And Holt. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer. I thought back. Every nod from Holt, every time he stood just far enough away to be helpful, but never exposed. Was he the Watcher? Or was he the shadow pulling the strings behind them? I stared down at the folder. Every page now a weapon I hadn't wanted to draw. But I would. Because they didn't just silence Rain, they rewrote the war. "I want access to the full file," I said. "No redactions, no ghost lines, every encrypted transmission since the Black Line disbandment." Tara didn't blink. "That'll get both of us flagged." "Then flag me." She nodded once, as if she'd expected it. "Give me 48 hours, she said, already halfway to the door. "And Lena?" I looked up. "They're scared of you." She left. I sat there for a long time, just sat. My thumb traced the edge of Rain's old letter again, the words already memorized. "You know what to do." I did. I just didn't know how far I'd have to go to do it. Later that night, I returned to the vault. Not to break in this time, just to watch. The hallway outside, it was quiet, dim. I sat on the bench across from the entrance, hidden in shadow. At 113 hours, the door hissed open. I held my breath. A figure stepped out, short, fast-moving, definitely not my father, not Holt. They turned just enough for the light to catch their face. My heart stopped. Private Mason, the supply tech who signed off every requisition file in the armory. He was mid-tier, barely level 1 clearance, but his access to gear and incident logs made him invaluable. What the hell was he doing in the vault? I followed him, quietly, step by step, from the admin wing to the old logistics hallway. Then, halfway through the back corridor, he dropped something. Not a file, a photo. I picked it up as soon as he turned the corner. It was a surveillance still, of me, taken 3 days ago, in the vault. My back turned, the echo folder open. Someone had been watching me watch them, and Mason had it in his hand. I returned to my quarters in silence, shut the door softly, let the photo rest on my cot, and sat down, breathing slow. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was surveillance, active, coordinated, and for the first time, I didn't know if I was being protected by the Watcher or hunted by them. I barely slept that night. The surveillance photo lay face up on my cot, lit by the sickly yellow hum of the overhead bulb. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. My own back turned, the folder open, the insignia burned into the paper like a scar they never erased. They were watching me, documenting me, not just from the shadows, but from inside the system I'd been trying to expose. And the worst part, someone had seen my tattoo. I'd kept it hidden since day one, worn double layers in the heat, avoided group showers, ducking questions, keeping my back to the wall. It was instinct now, survival. But someone had caught a glimpse, which meant the silence wouldn't last much longer. The next morning the air tasted off, thicker, charged. I felt it before I stepped outside, like the ground itself had been holding its breath. Drill orders came early, full unit sparring assessment, public, no substitutions, all eyes, all ranks. I strapped on my boots with methodical precision, pulled my hair into a tighter knot, looked myself in the scratched mirror mounted on the wall above my bunk. You've been erased before. Not this time. Outside, the field was damp with early dew. Rows of trainees lined the mats, stretching, checking gear, whispering with jittery energy. Captain Holt stood center, arms crossed, voice calm but sharp. Pair off. No lists, no assignments, just instinct. Fisher moved first, straight toward me. Of course. His grin was as crooked as his attitude, eyes already dancing with challenge. Ready to make a mess of that file they keep rewriting about you? I didn't respond, just nodded once and stepped onto the mat. The bell cracked. He charged. Fisher fought like someone trying to prove something every second of every day. Fast, erratic, showy. He led with bravado, not tactics. I let him swing wild for the first 10 seconds, dodged, blocked, shifted weight from heel to toe, measured every move like I was hearing Falco's voice echo in my spine. Let them tire themselves out. You finish it clean. He lunged again, sloppy, off balance. I pivoted, grabbed his arm, flipped him onto his back, hard. The crowd went quiet. Then he scrambled up, angry now, reckless, and drove forward again. His grip caught my collar. The snap of fabric was loud. Then silence, because my shirt tore. And just like that, the air changed. Gasps rippled across the crowd. It wasn't the kind of noise made from shock. It was recognition, raw, collective recognition. Because there, stretched across my spine, exposed for the first time since returning to Iron Ridge, was the tattoo. Echo Unit's mark, bold, dark, unmistakable. The symbol the brass swore was decommissioned, the same one in the folder they tried to erase. Captain Holt stepped forward, his eyes locked on the ink. He didn't speak, didn't blink. He just stared, jaw tight, fingers flexing at his side, like something ancient had just been dug out of the dirt and slapped across his desk. And then, without warning, my father stormed onto the field. He didn't look at me. He looked at Holt. His voice cracked across the silence. "Nobody says a word." The entire unit stiffened. Holt didn't move. His eyes stayed on my back. Then, almost too quietly to hear, he muttered, "That symbol. I've seen it before." My father's face twitched. His voice sharpened. "It's nothing. An old training mark, long defunct." I turned slowly, tugging my shirt down, locking eyes with him. "Then why did you try so hard to bury it?" He didn't answer, didn't have to, because the damage was done. Every recruit on that field had just watched a cover-up bleed into daylight, and no one could unsee it. I walked off the mat, didn't wait for permission, didn't look back, but every step away felt louder than the last. By the time I reached the barracks, I already knew. The story was spreading. Through whispers, through stares, through the silence people reserve for things that shouldn't exist. I closed the door behind me and sat down on my cot, chest heaving. This wasn't just about proving I'd been part of Echo. It was about what Echo still meant. And clearly someone still feared that mark enough to silence a room. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to the back, and wrote 4 words. "This mark isn't gone," then underlined it, twice. I was about to close the book when a knock came. 3 taps, then 2. I opened the door slowly. Tara stood there, eyes wide, lips pale. She held out a folder. Not one of mine. Not from the vault. This one had no markings, no name, just 1 page inside. A printed report, classified, and stamped across the top, Project Silo Recall. Below it, reinstatement of select Echo assets for high-risk psychological targeting. And under that, my name. Not from this week. From last year. Before I ever came back. My stomach dropped, because this wasn't retaliation anymore, it was resurrection. The folder trembled in my grip, but not from the cold. I'd been drafted before I ever stepped foot back at Iron Ridge. They didn't recall me. They never released me. Project Silo wasn't just some long-dead protocol. It was a trap, one they'd been setting for years, one I'd walked right into. The rest of the camp faded into a blur that day. Chatter, drills, orders. I moved through it like a ghost, a phantom in boots holding secrets stitched into my spine. Back in my quarters, I stared at the name on the file again. Carter L. I should have felt rage. I didn't. What I felt was worse. Familiarity. Like this had always been the ending, one they'd written for me long before I learned how to read the script. By nightfall, Tara had mapped 3 more digital echoes in the vault logs. Each ping linked back to Silo Command, and each had my name tagged alongside someone else's. Falco. "Wait," I said. "Are you telling me Falco was on the Reformation list?" Tara nodded slowly. "And not as a relic, as an active file, updated just 4 months ago." "That's impossible. Falco's dead." Her eyes didn't blink. "Are you sure?" That's when the bottom dropped out. Because no, I wasn't. I remembered the memorial, the flag, the cold folded triangle placed into my palms by a man who wouldn't meet my eyes. But I never saw the body, never asked for the report, just believed what I was told, like a good soldier. Tara placed a hard drive in my hand. "I cloned the encrypted logs, but there's one more thing." She hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. "Spit it out," I said. I cross-referenced the timestamps with transport rosters. There was one outgoing classified flight from Ridge 3 weeks ago. It had exactly 2 names on the clearance manifest. "Let me guess. One of them was mine?" She shook her head. "Falco." I stood there frozen. A gust of wind rattled the old pane beside my bunk, snapping the world back into motion. He was alive, or someone was pretending he was, and either way, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The next morning, I walked straight to Holt's office, didn't knock, just opened the door and stepped inside. He looked up, calm as always. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked. I tossed the folder on his desk. His eyes scanned the cover. Then he closed it slowly, like he already knew what was inside. "Where did you get this?" "Where do you think?" I said. "Silo was never shut down. They just changed the locks." He stood, didn't deny it, didn't bluff, just walked around the desk and looked me in the eye. They told me you were unstable, too deep in Echo's conditioning, that you'd crack under civilian integration, that you'd come back eventually. And you believed them? No, he said softly, but I didn't stop them either. A silence stretched between us, heavy, bitter. I could have pulled you from this, he said. But I didn't, and I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Where's Falco? I asked. He shook his head. I don't know. Bullshit. He was marked as rogue, vanished after a failed directive in 2021. But if his name's back in the system, someone brought him in, or they're using his ID to bait you. The implication hit hard. If Falco was alive, he'd been hiding, and if he wasn't, someone was trying to weaponize his memory against me. Why? I asked. Why rebuild Echo? Why now? Holt's face darkened. Because Echo wasn't just elite. It was obedient, efficient, disposable. My stomach turned. They don't want truth, Lena. They want deniable assets. I clenched my jaw. And I'm first in line? You're the prototype, he said quietly. He didn't stop me as I left. Didn't call it treason. Didn't issue a command. Because we both knew it was too late for protocol. That night, I didn't go to bed. I went to the armory. Tara met me outside the fence, already in civilian blacks. No rank, no tags, just purpose. She handed me a comm link. No one's going to save you after this, she said. I know, I replied. Then I lifted the flap of my jacket, revealing the full mark across my back, and whispered, but they might regret not killing me when they had the chance. And with that, we disappeared into the trees, toward the coordinates listed in Falco's last transmission, toward the truth buried under a mountain of lies. The wind sharpened as we moved farther from Iron Ridge, like even the air knew we were stepping off the map. Tara didn't speak much. Neither did I. There was nothing left to say. The forest around us thinned as we reached the outer coordinates. Burned trees, cracked soil, the remnants of a site that had once been active, but was now mostly forgotten. A rusted fence half swallowed by undergrowth. Camouflage netting still fluttered from an old post like a ghost that hadn't been told the war was over. We found the bunker entrance just past the ridgeline, half buried, sealed by a rusted metal hatch with no lock, no insignia. Just one thing carved into the frame, Echo. Tara and I exchanged a glance. Then I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, warm. Someone had been here recently. The corridor was narrow, concrete walls sweating with condensation. We moved in silence, boots barely making a sound. The smell of dust and old oil clung to everything. At the end of the hall, a single door stood ajar. We stepped through, and there he was, Falco, older, leaner, gray streaks in his beard, but unmistakably him. He stood in the center of the room like he'd been expecting us for hours. I figured you'd come eventually, he said, voice low, weathered. My throat tightened. You're alive. He nodded once. Wasn't supposed to be, but that's Echo for you. I took a step forward, and something in me cracked open. Not grief, not relief, something deeper. He gestured to the small table behind him. A single file sat atop it, thicker than the one I'd found at Ridge. Handwritten notes, photos, maps, real ones. Everything they buried, every lie Carter signed off on, every operation we weren't supposed to survive. I picked it up. My hands trembled. What is this? Tara asked. Falco looked her dead in the eye. The truth. I flipped through the pages. Operation names I'd never heard. Black line directives I'd been told were disbanded. And my own name, listed again and again. Operator Carter, L, used in field tests. Evaluated for psychological endurance. Tracked under ghost protocols. You were their experiment, Falco said quietly. They never wanted you out. They just wanted you quiet. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. All those nights alone. The silence after Rain died. The orders that never made sense. The erased logs. My entire life wasn't just ignored. It was orchestrated. I looked up at him. Why didn't you tell me? Falco exhaled slowly, his eyes heavier than I remembered. Because I couldn't protect you if you knew, And because if I contacted you, they'd come for both of us." He paused, his jaw clenched. "But now they're already coming." "What do you mean?" Falco turned on a dusty monitor behind him. A live feed blinked on. Outside the bunker, 3 armored trucks, crest of Iron Ridge stamped across the hoods. "They followed you," he said, "or tracked the server breach." Tara's voice was ice. "They're armed." Falco nodded. "And they're not here for negotiations." The room darkened for a second as a storm cloud passed over the skylight slit above. Thunder rumbled deep and low, like the earth was trying to give us a warning. "We can't outrun them," Tara said. "We're not going to," I said, stepping forward. I dropped the echo file on the table. "I'm done hiding." I rolled up my sleeves, then turned around, pulling the back of my shirt up. Falco stared at the tattoo. His eyes flickered. Then he stepped closer and touched the edge of it with his fingers like it was sacred. "You earned that," he whispered. "They tried to make you forget who you were, but you never stopped being Echo." I met his gaze. "I'm not just Echo anymore," I said. "I'm the end of it." Then a crack echoed through the bunker, sharp and violent. The first bullet hit the wall to our left. I dropped, Tara diving beside me. Falco was already moving, dragging a case from beneath the table. Inside, comm jammers, 2 pistols, and a memory drive marked Redline. "Give this to the press," he said to Tara. "If I don't make it out—" "I'm not leaving without you," she said. He looked at me, and for the first time since the compound, I saw fear in his face, not for himself, for me. "You ready to choose a side?" he asked. I drew my knife. I already did. Footsteps echoed outside the door, closer. I locked eyes with him one last time and whispered, "Let them come." The first shot shattered the silence. Then came the shouts, the boots, the barked orders ricocheting down the corridor like falling bricks. We didn't have time to think, only move. Falco ducked behind the steel cabinet, sliding me the second pistol. Tara was already at the exit panel, hands flying over the controls. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear, from urgency, muscle memory, purpose. I flattened against the wall, heart pounding so loud it blurred the sounds outside. They were closing in. I caught Falco's eye. His face was calm, not resigned, ready. Like he knew this was always how it would end. For him. For Echo. He nodded once. I nodded back. The door blew inward. Flash grenades. Screams. I moved before I could think, firing low. Falco took the upper angle. Tara dove beneath the bench and kicked the Redline drive toward me. "Get it out," she hissed. "No matter what." They stormed in. 2 first, then 3 more behind. But they didn't expect us to fight like ghosts trained to vanish after impact. We didn't aim to kill. We aimed to disrupt, to give the truth time to escape. I grabbed the drive and ran, out the back tunnel, down the slope behind the old drainage shaft. Rain poured now, soaking through my jacket, slapping the mud as I slid downhill. Behind me, I heard one more blast. Then silence. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Somewhere in the forest below, an extraction team was waiting, Tara's last favor before we'd even reached Falco. I stumbled into their arms, drenched and shaking, the drive clutched tight to my chest. And for the first time since stepping back into Iron Ridge, I let myself exhale. 2 weeks later, it was everywhere. The Redline drive wasn't just data. It was evidence of illegal experimentation, asset exploitation, the sabotage of Blackline, and the cover-up of Project Echo. News outlets ran with it. Whistleblower reports confirmed what we'd uncovered. Internal audits ripped through military ranks like a wildfire. Arrests followed, resignations. A flood of formal apologies from agencies that once denied my name existed. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that I no longer had to prove I existed. I stood in front of a tribunal, file in hand, tattoo exposed by choice this time. Not to shock, not to accuse, but to reclaim. "This isn't a mark of shame," I said, voice steady. "It's a record of survival." Across the table, my father sat in full uniform, still a colonel, still silent. But when I met his eyes, I saw it. That shift. The sliver of something close to grief or guilt. Maybe both. He didn't speak. I didn't need him to. Some silences speak louder than any apology. Falco didn't make it out. I found out 2 days after the raid. They'd found his body near the northern ridge, 2 bullet wounds and a fractured comm unit still clutched in his hand. The transmission log had one final message, never sent. Tell her the truth matters, even if no one listens at first. I play it sometimes, just to hear his voice, to remember what we fought for. Iron Ridge was shut down 6 months later, the base decommissioned, records unsealed, Echo officially retired. But some ghosts don't rest with their files. I still wake at 4:17, still check the shadows twice before turning a corner, still trace the lines of the tattoo when the water runs hot in the shower. But I'm not running anymore, and I'm not hiding. I published a book, small press, just enough to get the story out in my own words. It wasn't about revenge, it was about remembrance, about drawing a line between who I was told to be and who I became when I started asking why. People ask what I'd do differently if I could go back. My answer's always the same. I'd speak up sooner, because silence never protected me. It only made the wound easier to ignore. But truth, ugly, painful, inconvenient, truth forced the wound to heal. Not neatly, but honestly. And that's enough. Somewhere out there, I think Tara's still working. Quietly, not in uniform, probably off-grid, but watching. Falco would have liked that. As for my father, he was stripped of rank last month. No fanfare, no press, just a notice tucked in the back of a legal update. I don't celebrate it, but I'm not sorry either. We all choose the hill we die on. He chose silence. I chose fire. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt erased, unheard, or underestimated, don't stay quiet. Speak, fight, dig, heal. Because your story matters, even if it makes others uncomfortable, especially then. Thank you for staying through the whole journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment with what part hit you hardest, or which story you want next. And if you want more confessions like this one, I've got another coming soon. See you there.